Yes, hello everybody. Nice to see you at the Maxon booth here. My name is Glenn Frey. We welcome you on the IBC 2014. We've got many great presenters here, and this time the last presentation here at 5 o'clock is done by a guy who's working for Man vs. Machine, a company located in London. He's working for them now for 4 years, I think.
For
4
almost
years.
5.
Almost
I don't
5,
know.
yeah. And he's doing a lot of creative stuff and a lot of technical stuff. So he builds rigs for the team and stuff that helps accomplish problems inside of Cinema 4D. And I really would like a great welcome and a big applause for Simon Holmedal.
Kind of. Holmedal. Yay.
Thank you.
So hi everybody. Welcome. Hi the internet. I'm just going to start off by showing you something that is not a reel, even though I've called it reel. It's more like a few projects that have been glued together. So there's like, the first one is a personal project that I did about a year ago. And then we have 2 jobs that we did at Man vs. Machine for Nike that we finished earlier, I think this year or beginning of last year. So one of them, the second one that is going to be in this edit is for Mercurial. So it was for the World Cup. So this had a lot of hits on YouTube, I know, but we didn't put it up until afterwards because they didn't let us. So enjoy, and then we'll get into some Cinema 4D action after that. Let's see if I can full screen this. All right, so that was a few projects, and I'm going to go in more into detail of the second one in the bunch at C4D Apt, or Advanced Production Techniques, later in December in Berlin. So check that out if you're interested in more techie stuff that we're going to go into. But if you have any other questions about any of these, just remember, and then we'll get to it in the end, because I'm probably going to finish a little bit earlier than expected. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is a project that I did for a friend of mine, or a couple of friends of mine. They have their own event in London for concept art, and it's called Industry Workshops. And it was a few weeks ago. It was a great turnout, and it was basically a bunch of concept artists just showing off their techniques and working through a whole 3 days from like 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening. So it was a really intense, with no oxygen whatsoever in the room. So that was kind of interesting. And they asked me if I wanted to do a video for them. So they gave me like really free hands to do whatever I wanted. So I decided to go with something really dark and evil, because I don't like compromising. I like making something that's really dark or really bright. I don't really want to be in between, because I think that's a compromise. So we're just going to have a look through some of the stills of this, and then we're going to go into more of the workflow that I came up with and go through kind of the mindset that I had when I created these different shots. So this is just a couple of stills from it. I'm gonna play this in a minute, and we're gonna go through then some example R&D files where I go more into detail how it's been set up and why it's set up differently for different shots and so on and so forth. And these are not really in order, but the main idea of this spot is like their logo is a cube basically. I'm gonna show you that in a second. So I wanted to go from like a kind of organic surface and form this kind of perfect cube as kind of a metaphor for shaping of an idea or like concept art in general. So it's kind of, I'm going to play the item for you. But first I'm going to try to find that logo so you know what that is all about. Let's see if I have it somewhere. Here we go. So this is the logo right there. So I didn't create it fully, but they were cool with me just creating a cube and then cutting to the type. So I'm going to show you the ident now. I'm going to play it 2 times because a lot of the shots are really quick. So just to see what's actually going on in it. And the sound design is done by a company called Echoic, and they did this for free as well, so I just want to give them a shout out. I'm going to play this again. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. All right. So there's a lot of surfaces that are changing in this spot, and we're going to go in about how I did that. So if we go into this first folder here, I think I already have it open, to be honest. So prior to this, I did some tools that are dealing with weight maps. So there's not really an easy way by default to animate weight maps in Cinema 4D. So what I did was I created this Python nodes that basically measures the distance from whatever object to sit on to all the points on the surface. So if we look at this weight map here, turn that off, and hit play, we should see a weight map growing. So this is literally just looking at the point indexes on on the whole surface, and then compares the distance between that and this null object. And then if it's within the range, it remaps that value into a weight map. So that gives you an animated weight map, which is quite hard to get otherwise. And you can see the same thing is happening here from the other null object. And then I created a few additional tools to deal with weight maps. So this one, for example, I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to open this up. So this one, it gives you a math function. So you can add them together or multiply or subtract different weight maps. So if we multiply or add these two together, you get something like this, which is, so you can see how you can start layering these up now. And if we look at this one, this is kind of a remapped version of that. So that's like we've taken all the values that were 0 or 100 and we remapped it to this edge. So that's done with this thing right here. So this is basically a curve, and we can change this curve however we want. We could use this to invert the weight maps if you just weren't happy with how it was. Or you can, basically grade it like as you would do in Photoshop or in After Effects. So there you go. If I take this like this, you'll see slightly different curve. So I use these tools for one of the shots when the cube is kind of forming in the end, and we're going to go into that in a bit. But first, I want to show you guys another part of this. So this is another tool. It works slightly differently. It still works on weight maps, but in this scenario, it actually looks at multiple objects in a under null object, and it, instead of adding directly the distance, it actually looks at the current state of the weight map and add to it over time. So if I hit play on this one, you'll see that around these boxes, you can see it starts drawing this weight map over time, and this is also have been quite useful. And you can use this to deform surfaces. Weight maps can also be used in shading, so you can separate different materials and the material attributes. And what's powerful about it is that you can have this controlling the deformers and the materials. So therefore, you will have like this kind of procedural workflow where I can just change this kind of seed here, and it will start growing in other areas. And it's actually not looking at the matrix object here itself. It's just remapping the positions of these matrix objects onto these polygons, and it's set to the same count. Again, we can use this same thing, the remap value and stuff, and we could get an edge or plug in deformers into this. I actually have another thing in the scene here. Let's have a look. So if we don't want to solo, we want to hide this original one. So here I have another object. It's the same amount of points and everything, and the difference being is that I have put these two tags in here. So this first one, it's just it's the remapping one that we were talking about earlier, but it's just a linear like translation. So it just literally copies the weight map as it is onto this new cube. So it will give you the exact same result as you had before, except it's not actually working right now. Let's see. We need to enable these down here. So now, if I go back to frame 0, it will reset the system and then add to it over time. And then this other one is a remap. So again, this is what you get from that. So that's essentially the edge in the spot that is traveling over the surface. So I actually put out some renders of this, if we can find them. So under C4D. Here we go. So here's some renders of this exact same scene, basically just so we can preview it a bit quicker and what you can do with this. So that's what we just saw. It's kind of understandable. Here we have that edge. You can see that it kind of slows down, and that's a result of the gradient is kind of not linear. Like it's graded in a way so it like adds smaller values the further away from the original point it is, and that makes it this slow down effect. And if you apply this to a deformer, so this is now in a jiggle deformer, using that same weight map to add gravity to those points. So it's quite fun. You can make something like a melting ice cream or whatever you want with this. Here we can see some more examples of this. So this is using the other weight map. So not the remapped one. Here we have, this is a displacer. And it's using a restriction tag to just restrict it to the area where the edge is. So I can show you that if you want really quickly. This is the same thing again, restriction with the displacer. I'll just show you that real quick. I have it set up in here. So yeah, there's the jiggle. And you can see here under forces, I've added my edge weight map to push it down. So if I hit play here, it's going to be a little bit slow because it's running all those Python tags, but you can see it's updating procedurally. And if I change this seed right here, you'll see we'll get a slightly different result. So that's quite fun. And this can be used in the shader as well, as I mentioned earlier. And I also mentioned the displacer, so I'm just going to delete this restriction first. So you see, this is actually what this displacer does by default. And when I add this restriction tag onto it and drag in our edge weight map, it restricts that effect to that weight map. So it gives you that kind of effect. I showed you that earlier, so I'm just going to go ahead and continue on. Question? Yeah?
The Python code?
Yeah.
Is that code you wrote yourself?
Yes.
Or did you take that from as a preset
No, I wrote the code myself. It's a pretty simple. I'm not gonna go into the code bit now because it's quite techy, but it's basically just measuring the distance from one vector value, subtracting it by the other, and then checking the length of that vector, and then you get the distance. And then you basically apply that into a range mapper that you can then use to do whatever you want. But I can show you that afterwards. I'll be on the demo station. All right, so I'm gonna jump on to the next scene file now. So this is actually a more practical example. This is the cube resolve. So you can see here I'm using these tools once again. I placed the null object in the center of the cube or on one of the corners, and I'm going to grow the distance, animate the distance of that over the surface. So if we look at this here and I hit play, hopefully, yeah, there we go. So this is now an area which I want to become more which I want to become the cube, and then I want to displace it later on. But let's just look at the weight maps as it is first. The second one here is a edge selection. I'm going to show you how to get this. There's a great plugin that Paul Everett does that creates kind of occlusion-based, what's it called? Do you remember what it's called? Finger? No? All right. But check that out, Tools 4D. He has a really great plugin for this kind of stuff. But if you don't have that, I'm going to show you a workaround for this particular example. So I just create a cube, and we're going to subdivide this cube. Hopefully. See if we can do that. What's the subdivide command? Subdivide. There we go. I was clicking the wrong button. So here we have a cube, right? And we're going to start off by using this great tool, which is the phone break selection. Has anyone used that before? Because I bet most people don't use this, but it's really powerful. So if I just enable it, you can see it kind of highlights the edge a little bit, and you need to be in edge mode, by the way. And it kind of highlights the edge, and you can restrict it to a certain angle change. And this will give you a selection, so an edge selection. So this is really great. Now you can grow this selection and set the weight map. And voila, you have that kind of thing again. So why is this useful? I'll show you. So if we go into the cube resolve again, I've used that remapper again to basically just grade it to be the complete opposite. And then I'm using this math node here to take the first and the second weight map, or the first and the third. So it takes these two and combines them, and it gives us this. So basically, now we have a weight map that animates, but it also affects only the areas that we want to displace. So if I show you, if I turn on this displacer here, this is basically the effect I was after. So now I can go from a kind of disturbed surface, if that's how you would call it, what you would call it, to more of a solid cube using these animated weight maps. And let's see what else we do have here. So this again, I showed you this earlier. It's an edge, and I actually baked this out. I baked out this effect for a bit faster preview, where I've added this delay effector to give a kind of a spring effect to it. And that I have this. I believe I have it here in this point cache. So if I hit play now, you can see it a bit quicker. And I have one more tool in this thing here. You can see the ripples there, kind of. I hope. And this tool is another one I built, which is based on velocity. So it reads out all the positions for each vertex and stores the old position from last frame and then compares them. And then you get velocity that you can then remap into weight map. So if I enable this tag here, you can see here, this is now going to run quite slow because we have like 5 of them at the same time. But now what this is displaying is the velocity, and this can again be used in the shader to create some nice shimmering effects or add additional effects to your already quite complex blend material. And I've rendered this out with a bit more poly counts as well, so you can see it in more detail, more like it actually was in the spot. So that's just the actual cube forming. And then here's the velocity weight map again. And you can start combining all these weight maps in your materials and combining them with shaders, and you can, like, the sky is the limit, really. So let's go ahead and jump onto the next section. So this is, so the weight map was great, but I found that you have to have a really dense mesh for this to work, like to get the amount of detail that you want. So I'll try to open this file. So this is kind of like an R&D scene that I set up to show off the workflow for some of the other shots where you're more closer to the ground. And what this is, if I hit play here, you'll see this kind of erosion-y effect happening over the surface. And it's really simple. It's just a simple gradient. You see it down there. It's a simple gradient that I've animated like that, and I've added some turbulence to kind of break it up a bit. And so that's the first thing that I used in the animatic state in order to just plan out the shots and stuff. And then the next step is to start layering this. So I copy this gradient and I use it as a alpha channel for different shaders. So in my case, I used the noise shader inside a layer shader. And if I render this, it'll probably be blown out. I'm going to turn off these lights. So you can see here, there's a bunch of different noise patterns that have been overlaid on top of each other. And this is how I started creating some of the displacement maps that I will later use. But this can also be used to like isolate different gray values for different materials in the blend material. So this works both with standard renderer or with V-Ray. I render this spot in V-Ray and I used the Ninja light to light all the shots. If you Google Ninja light, you'll probably find it. I have a video where I'm sharing this light tool. Anyway, back to the subject. So if we go into this material right here, you can see kind of a crazy looking. I'm going to open this up so we see it a bit better here. So it's kind of a slightly mental setup, but I'm basically using this gradient, this original gradient down here, to mask this folder. And inside the folder I have a few noises. One is overlaid on top of another, and I have a black solid here on top of that to kind of just darken it down a bit. And then everything that isn't masked by this original gradient is under here. So they are overlaid and multiplied on top of each other just to break up the noise pattern so it doesn't look like a repeating surface. So after I have this, I start adding it into displacement. So now I just plug literally exactly the same thing into displacement map. And if I render this, you start to see some quite detailed, a very detailed surface that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get with a weight map and that kind of approach. And this way you don't have to have a crazy dense mesh either. But the same rules still apply. I'm using this gradient now with a displacer because this takes textures instead of... oh, actually, this one is using... oh yeah, so this just has two different noises. One being with different seeds in them. And then I've masked one with the gradient. So that way we have this kind of effect. It's very subtle. But still, I've cached this out here in this point cache so you can see it a bit more clearly. Ignore that. Let's just have a look at some of the outputs I did here. So here you can see this is the first level. This is what we just looked at. So this is just literally a render directly from that scene. And then the next level is the... so this is the deformer applied to that animated noise pattern. So that's all that crazy layer shader I just showed you guys. And then next one is displacement. So this is what we talked about. And what's cool about MoGraph is that you can actually use shaders as well together with your with your shaders. So I cloned a bunch of like crystals because I wanted crystals to be on the surface of this in the spot. And you can use, let's see if I open this one up. You can use that same gradient now to turn on the visibility of these or scale them or do whatever. This is just visibility in this example. But you know, you could do pretty much whatever you want, and you can use some of the other noises to randomize them as well, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So I'm just gonna show you that really quickly how that would work. So you would clone. I'm just gonna use a matrix object now because it's quick for the CPU to compute. Let's drag in our plane, and it's completely full at the moment. Let's just add surface and clone out a bunch of them. So now we have, let's say, okay, nearly 900 of these on the surface. And if we wanted to restrict it to one of the other halves, we could use a shader effector. So I'm just going to add a shader effector to our scene, make sure that our matrix object is selected, and we select our custom channel, color, and then we drag in our texture. And you can see it scaled them up. That's like the default behavior of the shader effector. But if we go in here and we turn off scale and we turn on visibility, it disappears on one of the halves. And if you wanted the other half, you can control, you can go into the min-max and adjust these. So if you just invert these now, you get that side instead. And this will now update with that gradient. So now everything is driven by it. You have deformers, you have the texture, and also the surface objects on the surface is being controlled by this whole shader. So it was quite an interesting technique to figure this out. So the next step after that was done was adding smoke, and I used Turbulence FD for this. And I wanted to emit from the actual edge of this texture as well. In the end, I actually didn't. I just used like normal noise shaders to do it. I'm just going to show you the previews here. So this one is quite slow. I don't know. I used the NVIDIA card. If you use a CUDA card, you can actually simulate about 10 times faster using Turbulence FD than if you were to do it on the CPU itself. So here's one of the other surface shots. So that's what it would look like in the viewport. So this is now generating the smoke, and it has a wind applied to it, so it kind of blows over and across. And you can see that these crystal things is kind of scaling down as well, and that's using that gradient that we talked about earlier. And then this is the exact same thing again, but just on one of the wider shots. So that's kind of an overview effect. So I used the same parameters for both those shots. I just scaled the actual container differently. All right. So that was it about the ident. So let's just play it again. And if you guys have any further questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So in this shot, for example, so in the corner shots where you see the cube, like if I go turn off the volume here. So in this shot, it's fully made with that weight map as I showed you and the displacer to kind of displace the surface. And then, yeah, same thing there. But most of the other ones I used a gradient. In some cases I used a noise shader. So for example, the second shot, if I go back, this is kind of neat thing. So this one wasn't too much happening. But in this shot, you can see it kind of comes from two different ends. So I couldn't really use a gradient in that case. So instead of doing that, I actually used a noise shader and a distorter. So it's kind of an interesting workaround in order to get the same erode kind of effect. So I'll show you that really quickly. I don't fully understand how this works, but I usually get the result I want out of it. So if I just add a normal material now, I'm just going to add a noise shader to it. And we can scale it up a bit. So if we render this, we get that. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger again. There we go. So that's okay. I'm going to grade this weight map or this noise map a little bit so we get kind of a hard edge to it. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm going to scale it up even further. Yeah, let's make it even bigger again. There we go. That's all right. So I have a really high contrast here, which gives this really curved edge. And that's great, but I wanted this erosion kind of effect. And in order to grow the effect, I just grade it. So I can start it down here. Oh, let's see here. Yeah, so you animate this. So let's just do that really quick. Brightness. And then, yeah, something like that. So if I set this to render, let's just do that really quick. This will render really quick, hopefully. Yes, I want to render. Thank you. You can sort of see how it's growing over the surface. So that's great. But now we want to make this look more like an erosion. So I would put this whole noise shader inside of a, what's it called? Distorter. And distorter basically distorts the image. And you can use another texture. So you can use the image-based texture, or you can just use another noise. So in my case, I'm just going to take a noise, and I'm going to find something that looks a bit more aggressive looking. and scale it up a bit and contrast it. And hopefully now we'll see a slightly different result. So if I go forward here, you can start to see how it breaks up that edge. So that's another approach that I did. And this way you can just change the seed of the noise until you get something that works with your composition within the shot. So that's what I used on that second shot. I went by it quite quickly, so I'm just going to show you it one more time. So yeah, here. It kind of grows in the top there and it starts creeping in the corner. So that's about it about that tool. Before I started doing this project, I actually had done some stuff prior that is similar, because I'm really a fan of this dark, evil-looking stuff. So I'm going to see if I can find that here. So yeah, I did this. Oh, that's the final. Here we go. So I did some old R&D for a pitch. So this was for Fox Sports 1, I believe. Let me double check that before I say something. I think it was. Yeah, Fox Sports. So I'm just going to open this. They are a bit disturbing, but it was fun to make. So this is a muscle or a brain thing. And the idea of this spot was that it would grow from this kind of cave environment. And as you can see, it's kind of a similar style. It's really dark, high contrast in hue and saturation. And the idea was that it would pop out of this kind of rock shell inside of this cave. And the parent of this thing would live inside it and would be this Fox Sports logo. And it would have sitting here in the beginning and then falling down into the water. And this would be like the mother of this thing. And this tumor thing would then form the one of the logo. So, because it was a new channel, so it was like birth. They didn't go for that in the end, so I can unfortunately not show you any animating bits on this one. But I did some other R&D here on the surface. So this is some stills from that. Again, it kind of has this water surface on top of it, because I always wanted to have that in that spot. And this is an animating surface again, using a noise pattern, similar to what I just showed you. So if we hit play on this, you'll see kind of a transforming noise. These noises are animating a bit as well, which is why they kind of dip down again. And I have a render of this as well. There we go. Yeah, so you can see there's like two different layers on top of it. It's one being just the water surface, which is a subsurface material in V-Ray. And then you can see it's kind of masking different materials here as well with other noises, so you can get that different surface textures. And this is, again, very similar effect. So this is all part of the R&D that I did prior to finishing this spot. So I think that's it for me. But I'm happy to take any questions or anything. If anyone has anything. Or if you have any questions about the stuff I showed you in the beginning. So let me just run the reel one more time. So yeah, I'll let this run, and after that we can take some questions. So think of something, all of you. If you're interested in knowing more about, sorry, I'm just going to stop it a little bit. If you're interested about knowing more about this particular project, you should check out C4D Apt on Vimeo On Demand, covering that a bit more there. But I can answer any questions you have now as well about it. There we go. All right. So questions? Anything? No? All right. Don't have to. I will be around for a little bit. No one could think of a question they wanted to ask. That's great. I must have covered everything. Pingu? Yes, all of these have been rendered in V-Ray, with the exception of the end shot of Mercurial, which is Octane.
My question is actually, how do you can render V-Ray alongside Turbulence FD?
Yes. So the question was, how do you integrate Turbulence FD with a V-Ray render? And in my case, I composited it all together after the fact, which you might have guessed. But I used, here's my contact details, by the way, if anyone wants to contact me. But I used, when I set up the industry workshop spot, for example, I had this in mind when I started, that I wanted to have smoke and stuff like that. And I don't know if you guys have used Fritzluft or like post-smoke effect or like depth of field effects, but they don't always work too great. So in all of these shots, for example, you notice that it's at an angle where if you were to look at the depth pass of the scene, it would be kind of a perfect gradient. And that really helps to integrate smoke and stuff like that, because you can just use the normal depth pass to apply depth of field, and it will kind of apply to the smoke, even though it won't really make sense perfectly. It kind of gives you enough of an effect that the smoke is integrated into the footage. But it's basically just screened on top. I usually output a atmosphere multiply pass, I think it's called, and that can give you that basically gives you the thickness of the smoke, and you can use it as an inverted luma mat inside of After Effects to put it on top and give you a little bit more detail. But generally speaking, I usually just screen it on top, and it works fine for the most part, I think. Any other questions? Or anything? All right. Well, yes. Yes. So, yeah, exactly. So this edge you can see here is basically the gradient that we were building earlier that have been then remapped like that. So all the values in between 0 or black and white, all the gray values are clamped into this really fine edge, and I've used that edge as a mask for another texture. So you can't really tell, but it's kind of like a techie texture, like a pattern I found that I'm masking in on this. I don't think you can really see that though. It's always out of focus, but you can kind of start to sense it there a little bit. There you can see it. So it's like a small texture that has been masked in with that edge to add even more detail onto what's already detailed enough. But yeah, yeah. So that's that. And then I used a bunch of flares and shit, to just create some haziness and color. Here I used just a noise that is animating, just to give some sort of disturbance over the surface as it kind of just spins around. And I felt that this the spin was quite important, because I wanted the resolve is kind of like there's no perspective on this cube in the end, so you can't really fly a camera around it. It's going to look really weird. So that's why I kind of started with this kind of zoom in of this corner here in a bit. There you go. And then just some cutaways to the end. It's kind of a cheap way of getting around that problem, but yeah, kind of worked. All right, so that's it for me. If you don't have any more questions, again. Anything? No? All right. Thank you. Thank you, the internet. I hope you enjoyed it.